But are we?
Candace Owens is getting sued again. Is she right about her allegations? Or has she gone too far this time? Or could this potentially be what some people have called the Trump curse? Or is there something else even deeper going on here? We're going to dive into that in just a moment. Jesus. So, Doug, what do you got for us today?
Well, I learned a new word today. I don't know about you guys, but maybe you've heard this word before. It's called transvestigation. You guys heard that one?
Just about 20 minutes before this show.
Well, that's what this is. What Candace is doing is called a transvestigation, apparently. And when I saw that word, I was like, "Oh dear Lord, help us all." But anyway, so yeah, she's really getting deep into this this fascinating international defamation of French First Lady Brigitte Macron. I believe I'm pronouncing that correctly. I did take 2 years of French in high school, so we'll see how well that helps me today.
Nailed it.
Nailed it. So a little bit of a recap. So in case people don't know what's going on, she is basically accusing Brigitte, we could just go with the American version, of being a man. Right. And at the same time, she's very noticeably drifting away from normal conservative realms, particularly away from Donald Trump, and kind of not really being a huge proponent of him at the moment. And that's why we have this idea that maybe she actually is bringing on the curse of the Trump curse, right? So
fill us in, Doug. What is that?
What
is this thing called the Trump curse?
Yeah, I don't know what we're talking about. Let's define some terms here. Yeah.
Basically, it's really simple. It's whenever someone crosses Trump or strays from the MAGA fold, something bad seems to happen to them. And there's no explanation for it except for, well, it must be the Trump curse.
But there's somebody that's been pushing it, right? Like
it's a little different. It's a little different than the Hillary curse, where people end up taking their own lives.
Yeah, it's a little different,
right?
Okay, just to be clear about that.
But what? Let's pull up the search results for Benny Johnson.
This
is a public canceling, not a life canceling thing,
Right? Yeah. Well,
okay.
Yeah. So this concept was popularized. I don't know if he originated it, but it was popularized by Benny Johnson. He's got this whole thing, like list of videos where I get this is Clooney. I'm guessing George Clooney had the curse. Rosie O'Donnell had the curse. Stephen Colbert, P. Diddy, Ellen DeGeneres, George Lopez. So all these people came out against Trump, like really vehemently came out against Trump, and they ended up having something bad happen to them. Basically.
Yeah, he's got about I think it's over 24 videos talking about the quote unquote Trump curse. And I think, obviously
theory.
Benny Johnson is probably kind of using it as a trope. He's kind of being funny about it.
Yeah.
But I think, whether there's a actual curse or not, it's kind of a interesting, funny conversation. But also I think it just kind of points to the fact that it's like at some point when somebody decides to go against what you might call the inevitable, like the Matrix reference there, like it's like you're not, it's like you're going to get yourself either canceled or you're going to get something's going to happen. There's going to be backlash, and if you look at it, a lot of these people like what's her face, Zellweger or whatever her name is, that was in Disney, the Snow White, it's like she's one of the quote unquote Trump curse, people or whatever. But it's like she kind of did that to herself, right? Like she kind of just kept digging herself into a deeper and deeper hole and never relented. And then eventually the public saw her for who she really was. And I think that's kind of what's happening in a lot of these cases. I mean, Trump himself, obviously there's allegations against Trump right now and all that. So it's like, he's got his own mess to deal with at the moment. So
I like this. This is a good.
There's that side of it. But anyways, that's what we're talking about. We're talking about the Trump curse. There's another curse I want to mention a little later that I actually believe is a real curse, but that it's not the Trump curse. And we're going to talk about that a little later. But is this what Candace Owens has essentially done to herself? Doug, what are your thoughts, Doug? Where are you at on the
Well, to get to that, we got to rewind a little bit and see exactly what she's doing, because what's happening is she's getting sued from the Macrons, right?
That's what I meant. Let's go to the story.
So why is she getting sued? Well, it's this claim, but where is this claim originating? Like, who you can't just be like, she looks like a dude, you know, or dude looks like a lady, whatever, and like, and go off of that as your basis alone. You have to have some sort of evidence. And so I found some interesting things, of course, as always. But first, I wanted to get your guys's thoughts on how you would define a curse, like in general. What would you call a curse? Because I think that's important to define these things before we really.
Well, so for me, the actual definition, like a biblical definition, I think would be a supernatural thing that you really can't control it, and it's because there's an open door for the enemy or something that you know opens the door into someone's life, and then you know things come around. That's what the enemy does. But for this, you know, as far as this goes, I think it's kind of like more of a, these things are happening at the same time, and so let's come up with something to call it that's not a coincidence, but it's a little more precise, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't know. It depends on if you're talking spiritually or if you're talking to like socially, you know, or politically or whatever. There's a proverb that says a causeless curse does not land, essentially, right? Or a curse without cause does not alight. And so it's this idea of you have an effect on what happens to you. And even from a spiritual perspective, when you're talking about curses from a spiritual perspective, like you had something to do with it, right? Like that's kind of the concept. If you're looking at it biblically, you made a decision to do something, agree with something, allow something, whatever it was, you know, or you did something and it ended up with something else. So it's like, I think that's kind of the perspective I would look at, is like, yes, there can be a spiritual aspect to it, but also I think it's like, it's not causeless, you know, and if it is causeless, it's not going to apply. So
this might be a little off topic, but I mean, I agree with y'all's point about like a curse. And if I ever say the word curse, like I'm probably talking about it from a spiritual perspective. I would be, I would probably have, if somebody pushed back and be like, oh, that's not really a curse, I'd be like, oh, well, I just meant like a metaphorical sense. It's just like a coincidence. Like somebody did something and this happened, but I don't usually, I guess I'm kind of careful with how I use the word curse. Like probably from having a Christian spiritual background, I'm just like, no, there's real curses. You know, the Bible says death and life is in the power of the tongue. Like there's real, like speaking life or speaking death over things. I like that proverb you brought up, Troy, about something not landing without a cause. I just wanted to point out, though, I do think this is, we're veering into a really odd territory on the conservative kind of side of politics and the right and stuff like that right now. And I know this isn't specifically about like Trump and the Epstein drama and stuff that's going on, but I know that part of what is kind of going odd and weird right now is that because Trump and I know we could dig into this, but appears to kind of be maybe trying to like cover up something or veer away or just at least not meet the original promise that he said he was going to meet, which was full transparency, release all these files, all those kinds of things. I know that Candace Owens is one of the people that has been trying to hold him to account in that sense, right? And there's a lot of people, and it's not just her. It's not like she's not some outlier in the MAGA movement. There's been a massive split, even just in the last month, in the MAGA movement of people trying to figure out why did the Trump administration go from saying we're going to do this, we're going to release all this stuff, and now switching over to Trump saying there's nothing here, it doesn't exist, calling it a hoax, right? Calling it a hoax, blaming it on the Democrats. We could, I know we've talked about this in other episodes, but I just wanted to point that out. So it's not like Candace Owens is the only person who's like turned her back on Trump or something like that. We're having a massive split right now over the Epstein issue, and there's can be seen through almost every conservative circle.
And maybe, Doug, to actually give a definition from me, I think I kind of talked a little bit about whether I think this is one or not, but I think there's kind of two from the Bible. There's just basically consequences for violating God's laws and commands. Like that's one thing, like the serpent or cursing the land or just bringing curses on themselves, like consequences for sin. Like that's one thing. And the other would be like more like when you think of witchcraft or the occult or that sort of things. Like I've interviewed people that were in cannibal tribes in Africa, like they went to minister to them. And it's like pronouncements of evil, like made by an individual towards somebody with the hope of inflicting harm or like a supernatural consequences or something like that. And there's a lot to unpack there, but those are the kind of the two main things that come to mind for me.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think that kind of the general concept that you guys are getting at is the in the supernatural thing, the supernatural world that you can't really see. Yeah, there's this idea of a curse, but there's also really just simply cause and effect, and that I think that has a lot to do with you bring the curse on yourself when you do something that maybe you shouldn't have done, or just actually require some kind of consequence for it. And maybe you should have done it and you are willing to suffer the consequence too. And apparently Candace Owens is very much willing to suffer whatever consequences of this, because she has actually even doubled down on it recently. And here, I wanted to show you guys this one.
Before you jump into that, to kind of add to that point, Catherine Brandon said irrational hatred will always be a downfall. And I think that is a good point to make, is like, when it comes to Candace Owens, I think she's almost stepping over into this reality of irrationalism instead of always bringing the evidence, always bringing the side of truth and that kind of stuff. And I think that does lead to a downfall, because people start to see through the irrational side of your argument, you know?
Yeah, and I would say that the sad thing about that too is that somebody could be genuine and they could really believe it, and they could have things in there that are legit and correct, but it gets lost in the messaging, and just loses credibility now. Because of
and I'm not coming out and saying she's wrong. I think let's look at the evidence, right? So Doug,
that's what I'm saying.
I think that's exactly it, Ryan, is it's getting lost in the messaging, because I mean, I went down the rabbit hole just a little bit on this one, and I was like, oh, there's
just a lot of it.
Just a lot of it. Yeah. There's some convincing things. And I wonder, actually, I'm going to be watching this close, because I'm super curious to see what comes out of it. Ian Carroll posted, and everybody knows Ian Carroll is Candace Owens' like right-hand man, right? He says, everyone's saying Candace is
probably not like you saying that, but yeah.
What?
You would probably not like you saying that, but yeah.
Oh, well, I mean, that's what it appears on the surface.
You're going to get sued for calling him Candace Owens' right-hand man. Doug Smith sued by Ian Carroll.
I welcome any rebuttal. That's fine. He can call me out and be like, I'm not. And then I'd be like, all right, cool. You're not, dude. That's fine. Doesn't bother me any.
I'm being silly.
So he says, everyone's saying Candace is cooked. The Macrons are going to bankrupt Candace. Clearly don't know the state of play, the story, or the evidence. They couldn't pin two relatively small French journalists on their home turf for defamation. Candace went into this story with her lawyer pre-gaming. She was taught by Xavier Poussard what the first family would do. This is the greatest gift they could have ever given to her, and she knows it. There is a growing non-zero chance that Candace Owens will topple the Macron government. These are very, very strong statements. But
that is.
They're just when I read this and I heard the things from Candace, I was like, they better have some evidence, because they're talking like they do, you know.
So are you can I mention really quick about the other lawsuit that they're talking about, or are you going to talk about that?
Please do.
No, I wasn't going to get too much into it. I was just going to mention it, but you can go ahead and say something.
Yeah, in 2021, the French first lady sued two women for libel in France after they spread the claims on social media that she was born a man. Same thing. And a lower French court found the two women liable for defamation and awarded damages to the first lady, but and to her brother in 2023. But earlier this month, or I don't know if it was this month or previously, a Paris appeals court overturned the decision, accepting a good faith defense, ruling the statements not actionable, which nullified the damages that were awarded. So that's what happened.
So they won the case. The people that were essentially defaming her, talking badly, calling her man, they actually won the case originally, and then they lost.
No, they lost the case originally,
and then they got overturned. But here's I'm going to push back.
Just to put this out there real fast, it is the Macrons are also appealing it now to a higher court,
right?
So it's going to go to an even higher court after this. So we don't know what the final.
So it's not over. So we got to watch that too, Doug. Put it on your list.
That court case isn't over yet.
I'm going to play the devil's advocate a little bit here, because what some people don't know is in the original trial, when it came to trial, there were the two ladies. One of them was a YouTuber, and she's a self-proclaimed like a spiritualist or something. She's like a medium basically, and she interviewed this other lady for 4 hours on her YouTube channel. It was Roy and Ray. So Roy interviewed Ray, and she's the one that brought all the evidence. And then the day of trial, Ray, who had the evidence, didn't actually show up because she was sick. So she didn't even show up to the trial. So that may be why it got appealed later, or it got overturned later. So they lost, if that makes sense. They lost, and it's because the person with the evidence didn't even show up, in my mind. So maybe it got overturned later because the court said, well, they didn't even have a chance to show their evidence, or whatever. So it wasn't even it was the person that had interviewed originally. It wasn't even. So I don't know. I'm just pushing back from the other side. That may be why it got overturned.
Yeah, it should have been they should have pushed the case out, or the hearing out. That's ridiculous.
So the
That
other
was a
lady had
mistake.
to essentially represent the other person's views, and she wasn't even there.
And just let me give an example of that. So I was on a jury for a criminal homicide, and they were, after they went through at the end of it. So he was found guilty, and at the end of it, we found out that he wasn't allowed to present a certain type of evidence because the judge determined that it wasn't relevant to the case, and it would sway the jury, and it probably would have swayed. Like, after, I was kind of not happy about it because it would have seriously made me reconsider. I can go into it if you want, but it basically, so then they went for a mistrial or appeal or whatever to have it say that this needs to be thrown out and this guy doesn't need to be. So that's a real thing. I don't think in this case it mattered, because the thing is, there's a law that makes the information they would have shared irrelevant. So it's kind of like a case. I can't remember the term, but it's kind of like you find them guilty based on the law, not based on your opinion, which I don't agree with that, because if there's a law that says somebody is not killing a baby that was just born, I would say that's killing a baby. So anyway, back to you.
I know we're going to get into the Candace Owens stuff. I just want to say really fast, just so you guys know where I'm at on this, because I think this is kind of maybe a little funny, and maybe we'll see where this goes. I'm really curious, Doug, about where this is going to go and getting into. I didn't know this was a thing until today. I didn't know that anybody had ever accused, I'm going to say the American pronunciation, Brigitte Macron. I didn't know anybody had ever accused Brigitte of being a man. When I heard about it, I thought it sounded ridiculous. To be honest, I still think it sounds pretty ridiculous. I did a tiny bit of research. I actually just mentioned it to a friend of mine, and I was kind of like, this looks kind of silly. I think Candace Owens is pushing something false, in my personal opinion. I don't know why she's making these claims and saying these things. It sounds like she's just jumped on a weird conspiracy. And I was quite surprised to find that my friend of mine was like, oh no, dude, like you just don't know the evidence. They're like, you should watch Candace Owens like 5 hours that she's put out on all the evidence. They're like, because it's not been disproved. Like, they really think that Brigitte is a man. And I was really surprised by that. I was like, oh wow, this person really thinks that this person's a man. I don't know anything about it. When I first looked at it, just today, my initial, gut sense was just like, this sounds like a silly accusation. I don't know why we're talking about this, but obviously it's news now, and a lot of people must really believe that it's true. So I'm curious to get into it. I'm interested to get into it.
Well, let's get into a little bit of the accusation. I'm not going to get into great detail like she doesn't. This is her series, Becoming Brigitte, which is what your friend was referring to. And I started listening to some of it while I was putting this together, and I didn't get through the whole thing. But so if anybody's interested, it's on her YouTube channel. Go check it out. But here's the general accusation, other than the idea that Brigitte is a man. So there's an interesting history, and man, I say this a lot on this channel because it's just so hilarious, but this is a movie, guys. This would make such a good movie. Good as in bad, but so back when Brigitte was young, she had a brother, still does technically, quote unquote, have a brother, but the theory goes that the brother, who is Jean-Michel Trogneau, that's the maiden name, Trogneau, is said to have, according to this theory, taken on the identity of Brigitte, the sister, because the sister supposedly died at a young age. So according to this theory, if I understand it correctly, Brigitte died at a young age, and then Jean-Michel took that identity and then transitioned to a woman, and has been that ever since. And this was like a long time ago when he did this in the 70s. And there's this video that's purported to be the original Jean-Michel, otherwise known as Veronique. And Candace covered that pretty in depth. It's like this old video from the 70s where they're actually talking about this person's transition. And people are saying that this is Jean-Michel, aka Brigitte Macron. Okay, that's the theory, right? So I guess I was like, this is old.
So they're saying no, it was actually the other sibling that died then, or
right? Brigitte died,
yeah,
and Jean-Michel
You're saying the brother transitioned and is
The brother transitioned, and
So then they
one
just
of
say the brother disappeared then, or what?
So
basically,
here's
the
my
brother has
big.
been mysteriously gone ever since.
This is where I would push back against what Ian Carroll, or whatever his name is, Ian Carroll, what he said about her, Candace Owens, single-handedly toppling the French government is Macron is 47, Brigitte, or whoever she may be, is 72.
Right.
47,
25
72.
years. Yep.
Huge.
25-year gap.
Huge gap,
pretty
right?
odd.
She was his high school teacher.
Exactly. She was the high
15
school
years
teacher.
old. He was 15 when she was 39
Right.
Yeah.
So in my
when
mind,
they met.
if there's not already enough of a sex scandal happening in the French government there, just with that story itself, potentially, I mean, I'm like, that is just so weird and it's so unconventional that I'm like,
It's France, man.
her being a dude is not going to topple, even if that's true, that's not going to topple the French government. I mean, is it going to do anything at all? You know what I mean? Besides the truth coming out, is it really going to do anything? That would be my question. It's like, what is that going to do? And why is that going to, besides, saying, well, Macron lied. Of course he lied. Politicians lie. It's like, besides being able to show that he lied about something again,
Of course he
like
lied.
normal. How is that going to topple the French government? You know what I mean? Like, I don't think anything coming out of it. I understand why they're suing her, whether it's true or not. But
that's
at the same
a
time,
big claim.
I have a question. Do you think so? I don't know what the rules for schools are in France, but do you think she ever shoved him in the face when he was 15 and she was his teacher? Or do you think that was just on the plane in front of everybody when he was the president?
I have that video pulled up just in case we needed to play.
on the hand with the ruler. That's what happened.
Yeah, that was a really.
But you're right, Doug. It's a big claim.
I'm definitely with you, Troy, on this one. I was thinking the same thing with the whole when I was like, because that was my thought. Well, I was like, if again coming from the perspective of, I don't think this is true. I haven't seen the evidence to make it convince me that it's true. So I'm coming from, it's probably not true. So I'm thinking she is a woman, and the claim that I saw, the official narrative, is that she was 39, married, had 3 children when she met this 15-year-old, and then they, had a relationship, and then as soon as he graduated from high school, she divorced her family and went and married this 18-year-old or whatever. And I was just like, I was kind of the same thing. I was just like, that's really perverse and really messed up, and a really gross, family situation. And that it's, again, like you said, Troy, I'm just like, well, if that's enough to be, if you want to be like the tabloid, person who's like talking crap about political marriage, there's a lot there that you can talk
that's enough
about.
there. And in my mind, if the people haven't freaked out about that already, then it's like, I don't think they're going to necessarily freak out about more truth coming out and it being a bigger story than that. Honestly. Like, I don't think Candace Owens is going to topple the French government. I think the French are going to be like, okay, like,
well, I don't think the French will appreciate if this was true. Like, I think that's a big deal. I would be a big deal to them. I mean,
a big deal, but like, what are they going to? I mean,
well, that's the thing. It's like maybe 10% of them are even following the story. Like,
they already hate Macron
I don't know.
as it is, like they already hate him anyway. So it's like, it's not going to make it that much worse. I don't know.
Icing on the cake, I guess.
If this was true and it came out and it was proved, or like a lot of the French people believed it, I could see it shifting some support away from Macron, or just like riling up the right-wing base in France to like an nth degree or whatever. But you're right. Like, the country is already moving that way. Like, they're having to, as all the other European countries are, they're having to do like shady suppression of the right-wing parties and attempt to keep a nationalist party from rising up and being like, all right, we're banning, no more immigration. This is getting out of hands. We're closing the border. We're going to stop being just like doing whatever the EU tells us to do. We're going to take our country back. Like, they're actively trying to keep that kind of thing from happening. I can see something like this coming out if it was true and all the French people believing it. Like, it might help that movement a little bit, but I don't think it's going to be a major. I would only think it would be a major. I think it would be small. I think it might be like a few percentage point shifts more than anything else.
There would have to be some other thing attached to it. That this is just like the tip of the iceberg or something. That like there would have to be something else attached to it for it to even topple their like family name or But I do want to say though, Candace claimed that he was groomed into the homosexual lifestyle as a teenager. And I want to say that I'm trying to remember the guy's name, but I met somebody who's now a Christ follower, gave his life to Christ, completely changed his life and took him out of that lifestyle. But he was out in a very liberal area and he was groomed as a 12 or 15-year-old, and he talked about how like a certain age range will groom, like the 40s grooms the 20s, and the 20s grooms the 16s, and the 16s grooms the younger. And there's a whole system that gets them into that lifestyle, and then they get their identity in that, and they think nobody wants them, and then they think, well, if they leave, then the Christians aren't going to want them, and then they get stuck. And so he didn't even want that, and then kind of took on the identity that, well, I guess have to do that, but then Christ set him free from that. And so anyway, I just want to say, like, that's a real thing. Like, that's right. It really happens.
Right. And even if she was, and again, I'm coming from the perspective thinking of that she's not a dude, it's actually really is a female. Teenagers can get groomed by older women, which is,
well, it doesn't have to be that steer step thing. Yeah. I mean,
right.
It
and
happens all the time.
Obviously that happens, for like on the homosexual side, but on the heterosexual side
also
happens as well. Because like older women grooming a teenager, this isn't the first time a teacher grooming a student. Like that's really messed up. And so
on both sides, it's not just women and men. It's like the
right. Sure. Either way, but yeah.
Well, let's look at some more evidence, Doug. I want to see what you got for us.
I think that it's more on the question of the like what is the purpose of it. It's more on like the government corruption and deception side, and
the fraud.
I think you're probably it's a fraud, and I think you're probably right, Ryan, that this is actually just the tip of the iceberg. If proven to be true in a court of law, it's going to probably open up a whole lot of other things, because like if she's got the evidence and she's got the paper trail and all of that, there's going to be a whole lot more that happened. And I think it has a lot to do with the that family, the Trogneau family, and how far back they go in French history and politics. And it might be uncovering more than just this potential deception, and that's her angle on it.
And I think, man, there's like I've just lost my thought. Oh, she was saying that I lost it again. Man, I'm over too.
Dude, you need some coffee. You need some coffee.
I better double down on my coffee.
You didn't do decaf today, did you?
Oh, that was my problem. I just had decaf halfway through the day.
It's a great opportunity for us to introduce our Filibusted coffee brand. No, I'm just kidding.
Yes. That would be awesome. We could definitely do a setup like that when we're ready.
Yeah.
Maybe one day. Well, I'll go through I have just a couple little points of what Candace is alleging as evidence, and it gets more like these sound really thin, but there's more. You got it? Go for it.
Yes, I remember before I forget it again. So I heard Candace make the point, and this is very true, but I can think of a few reasons why they might not want to go this route. But she said all they have to do is pull a DNA test and show whether or not she was born a male or a female. And it's very simple. Right. And she says the fact that they haven't done that and the fact that they did the lawsuit proves her case. Now, I would say probably I could come up with a few reasons why they wouldn't want to do that, because it's kind of it's kind of a humiliating thing. But this is also very humiliating. But they would really have shut this down very quickly if they would have just done that and said, like, go away, you pests, and just took the upper hand on it. But they did not do that.
Yeah, my friend pointed out the same thing. That was what I was just like, this is crazy to claim something like this about somebody. I was like, what about like their three, the official narrative is that she was married and has 3 kids. Like, where do the kids come from? All that kind of stuff. And that was what they brought up. They were like, well, if they wanted to shut this down and they had the evidence for it, it's just like, why don't they just show a picture of Brigitte pregnant, or why don't they do a DNA test or whatever? And I'm just like, well, I don't know, like maybe they don't feel like they need to produce that kind of thing. But at this point, if they're suing them, then obviously they are in the court of law. They are going to have to bring that kind of evidence.
Right.
And I'm just curious what, if any, evidence was brought in the last case, which of course recently got appealed.
And I'm thinking it'll be backed by on Candace's side, it'll be backed by, not only are they lying about this, but they're also lying about these things. And this is the key that unlocks these things. So if everything, she might be approaching it. I'm just saying, maybe, I don't know. But if everything hinges on whether or not Brigitte Macron is actually a man, then maybe that's what unlocks it. So if she might have to prove that first, and then be like, okay, now all the rest of this falls in line. And that's where it's the real gotcha moment. It could be something like that. That's just speculation. But the other problem with pictures of Brigitte being pregnant is, I guess the kids aren't that old, that we should have some sort of evidence of that, I would imagine. But
Oh yeah, Reese, it was the 1700s, so they didn't have photos back then.
There should be photos. I would say there should be
a whole
photo
different
proof.
theory.
They don't
But
have
then
like
also-
paintings or drawings or something on a,
you know,
on a goat
you can do a
skin or
DNA
something.
test.
Doug, let's bring some because I'll just tell you where I am. I'm currently on the side of the fence with Reese. I in my mind, she's a lady. She's still a lady. I'm not convinced, but I haven't seen the evidence. I haven't watched Candace's video, her 3-hour-long video or whatever it was, her film. So just send us a few of the
I'll give you some breadcrumbs.
I'm not going to say what I think because I haven't talked to an attorney yet about this matter,
Right.
so I'm just going to be quiet on this matter.
This is not a legally binding statement.
Yeah,
Interesting
on
discussion to
camera.
have.
We all are going to officially state that we believe she's not a man.
Yeah,
Just
you
so
guys-
that we don't get sued.
man, I got to start reading our pre-script notes a little better here.
Right.
Yeah.
Unfortunately for Candace, I think she has the backing that she can handle a lawsuit. So, but because I don't have that kind of backing, I'm just going to go on record and say I'm on the fence and I'm not making any.
Yeah, I would say I'm
accusations.
on the fence too. I would say there's good cases for both sides, and it's very interesting to follow. That's my official position.
Yes, official position. I don't want to say. I plead the fifth. I'll bet.
And
But I am going to say
for any attorneys watching, I said the first thing just to be funny. Okay, just that was it. That's all. I just have to say that. Okay, statement
Anyway.
closed.
So here's the theory. We're going to call these all theories. Okay. On the running theory, the idea that the whole children thing, like aren't they proof enough? Well, part of the theory is that there's another woman involved and she is the actual mother of the children, and she looks actually pretty similar to Brigitte Macron. And so I think if I remember right, it's that woman was impregnated by the man version, and those are the children. And so they actually do have her DNA. Technically, that's like, if I understand it right, I might not be fully understanding that. That's what I.
So
think
they're
that
saying
theory
it's her children. It's just that she's the dad, not the mom.
right.
Is what you're saying.
Yeah. So
I
there's
think about that. Wow.
There's alleged missing childhood photos of Brigitte. There are suspicious family records, like there were records that were just suddenly scrubbed and you can't find them. And so there's a it's called a 100-year rule or something like that, where family records or personal records cannot be retrieved if a person wants them to be private. You can't get them until after 100 years later. So that falls in the realm. So you can't really like go looking for birth certificates or death certificates or anything like that. Because what would actually really prove this easily would be if there's a death certificate for Brigitte Macron, or Brigitte. I mean, not Macron. It would be Brigitte.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, there was a 1983 movie called Mr. Mom, and they could maybe do a remake with a little bit different plot if this turns out to be the case. They've been doing remakes and make terrible remakes, and that would definitely be a terrible remake.
That would be a whole.
Well, no, Doug's right. This is going to be a crazy, crazy movie someday if it is true. If it's a true story, you know.
I mean, it would work. So here, I was going to save this kind of more for the end, but we can go through it right now. Well, hold on. I'm going to go over some of the lawsuit stuff real quick, just so everybody knows what's going on with it. The lawsuit is about 219 pages, and it accuses Owens of deliberate character assassination, fabrication for profit, and causing reputational harm across Europe and the United States. And now that that lawsuit is taking place here on American soil, it's in Delaware. So I don't really know how the laws work, but it does seem to be in favor of Candace Owens at that point, because clearly the French government was able to shut it down over there with the previous two. So there's that. Candace has doubled down. She says she's over target, and she is suggesting that the elites are afraid of her exposing the truth, and she's going to keep publishing more information on this. So let's jump over to this. Here's my thought on it. If it was just Candace Owens saying this and nobody else said anything, I would be highly suspicious, and I'd be like, don't jump on that bandwagon. Because I mean, Brigitte is not the only person who's been accused of this in high political positions. I'll just say, she's not the only first lady, quote unquote, that has been under fire for this, right? So it's an easy train to jump on, but there is this dossier, we are going to call it, because that's really what it is, that I found. And I don't know. Let's see if it'll. This thing right here is basically a book. And this breaks down piece by piece every little bit of information that you could possibly want on this topic. It is not confirmed. It's not verified. The author is anonymous. They don't want anybody knowing who they are. They claim to be a distant cousin of Jean-Michel / Brigitte, and by marriage. And they at first, I read through quite a bit of this. They at first are saying, I didn't think that this was a thing, but I started digging more and realized that there's something definitely bad going on here.
There's a there.
What's that?
They said that there was nothing there, but now they found out there's a there. Something there.
Yeah. So this is it starts right off the bat with the top 10 conclusions that they came to. And this is a person who is very well versed in researching family lineages and such like that, which I'm saying that from my perspective of it, and looking through all the evidence in this article, because I've done a lot of lineage research and stuff like that too. And I recognize the tactics at work here, and it's really a lot. There's some interesting information in here. Should this stuff be accurate, right? And that's the big question, is should this be accurate? But even just looking through it, you can kind of make some logical conclusions based on some of the claims here. But this person is claiming that yes, Brigitte Macron was born and raised a man and was this Veronique person, right? And then was married to Macron. Is Brigitte Trogneau married Macron, the same person as her brother, Jean-Michel? Yes. Is Jean-Michel Trogneau the father or mother of the 3 Uzzier children? The father. So, and Jean-Michel is the Brigitte person, right? That's this. It goes through all this. I mean, I'm just going to kind of scroll through quickly so you guys get an idea of just how exhaustive this thing is. It is.
Yeah, that is so huge. Hey, I'm going to push back a little bit, Doug, and say the problem with something like this, when you have what I would consider a manifesto around an argument like this, the problem is that somebody can base their findings on, they can bake their conclusion into the premise, and they can base their findings on what they've already concluded. And so anything that
confirmation bias.
Yeah, confirmation bias. Anything
absolutely.
that feels like it aligns with what they already believe about it, they're going to put in there, and so that's where you get that amount of information. Because there's no way that all of that is actual evidence, because there's so much of it.
Right.
Some of it probably is evidential, but some of a lot of it's probably not. A lot of it's probably just that these are the pictures or facts or different things, and they're just pulling from it. And obviously things like that, where it's okay, here's the nose, here's the hairline, here's the face. It's but that could be circumstantial evidence, that doesn't prove that the story's true.
Siblings do often usually look alike.
Yes, exactly.
Right. We get comments between Troy and I. People are like, "Yo, the same person," and I'm like, I don't think so. But they're
we don't look that similar.
I have another sibling as well that we get called twins sometimes. Female sibling.
Absolutely.
You guys look like you're twins. They're we're not even twins. We're just
I worked at the same corporation my brother worked at, and I was at another building. And my second week there, somebody said, "Hey, I thought you were over at this other building," and I'm like, "Do you think I'm Brad?" And they're like, "You're not Brad." And I'm like, "I guess you don't know him that well." So. That's my brother.
I have the worst. Y'all want to hear the worst? My wife and her sister are not twins, but they look very similar. Okay. So somebody came to our church, and my wife's sister is the worship leader at the church, right? So she's up on the platform. Everybody sees her every week. And they knew what her husband looked like. Okay. Because they had seen her up on the platform, and he's also a worship leader. They saw him up on the platform. So they come over to our house for a small group, right? Through the church. And they think that my wife is her sister because she looks very similar to the lady that was always on the platform. And the whole time, they told us later, but the whole time they're sitting there going, why is she here? And who is that guy that she's sitting next to and oh my God, holding hands with? And where is her husband? And the whole time they were like, what is going on? And why is nobody talking about this?
And why are they on the kiss cam up there for everybody to see?
At the Coldplay? They finally said something to her. They were like, where's your husband?
My God.
And she's like, what? He's right here.
Yeah, that's pretty bold, man. You're going up to somebody and
That is.
saying that when you think that person's not their like.
It was the best. When I heard the story, I was
so-
like, "Oh my gosh, that is so fantastic!"
That's funny. Doug, when you got a chance, when you think it's a good chance, I want to just mention 60 seconds on U.S. versus French law and the fact that this is right here.
We can do that, but hold on. I need to clear the airwaves real quick.
Yep.
I just saw this comment on the side here, asking me this. Am I using a pagan Starbucks mug? No. I renounce and I rebuke Starbucks in all forms. This is where the wild things are. Just so everybody knows. Cannot
It's the
stand
pagan where the
Starbucks.
wild. It's a pagan where the wild.
It's
things
the
are,
pagan
Doug.
kids book. Come on, not
Kids
the
book.
Starbucks.
At least I'm not going that far. Okay.
Yeah, at least it's not Starbucks, man. Oh, jeez.
You can't get worse than Starbucks. Yeah.
That's funny.
Anyway,
I'm
yeah,
gonna
go for
Google
it.
the brand of my water quick before I hold it up.
Okay. Yeah, go ahead and give your breakdown of French versus American.
That's
I am
funny.
interested in this because I was thinking out loud to myself, just to interject really fast here, what I think about defamation laws, because I don't even know what I think, because at the moment I don't think what Candace Owens is saying, I'm not convinced it's true. Okay. However, there are other people that believe it, and she's not the one that invented this conspiracy theory. I think that's important.
Right.
This is a theory that has been around for a while. People have accused the Macron's family of this for a while, right? And so for Candace to run with it and be like, I think it's true, here's all the evidence, I'm just, it's interesting to me because I'm like, should we be, where's the line for free speech? Like I'm a huge proponent of free speech. So usually I'm just like, yeah, let people say whatever they want. But then at the same time, you're like, okay, I guess it makes sense that it is technically illegal for you to be, spreading lies about somebody.
Right.
And it's like at some point, if it's actually a lie or if it's actually true, it needs to get proven true. Because otherwise, if you're just like, I'm saying all these lies about this person and I can't get in trouble for it, all that kind of stuff. So that, I don't know. I don't know where I'm exactly at with the defamation stuff. Because you have the whole like Alex Jones, he was spreading obvious lies about the whole like school shooting thing or whatever. Like he was saying things that I think were untrue. I say obvious lies. There's probably people already like, no, it was 100% true. I don't know. But he was, he got hit with a defamation. And it's kind of like, okay, well, he believes this thing. He thought, that was true. Whether it was true or not, like, are we going to make it illegal for what people can say? I don't know.
Well,
That was a really
I think there's a difference between arriving at a conclusion and presenting evidence.
So let's talk about libel quick.
That's what libel is. That's the difference between libel and sharing and free speech. I've arrived at a conclusion and I've said this is 100% true, and I'm a proponent of that. I'm pushing that. Or here's the evidence. Boom. This means this could be true.
So free speech does not include being able to make up something about somebody that hurts their reputation publicly, especially if it's a public figure. So that's where libel comes in. There's libel and there's one other one.
Is it defamation?
Yeah, defamation. So I don't remember the exact differences between the two, but one, it's kind of like a public official and one has more malice, I think. But we can maybe get into that. But just quick to go into this. This is a pretty rare case. I mean, it's complex because it involves foreign public officials and a U.S. defendant, and it's a defamation case. And so being filed in Delaware. So I'm just reading this summary here. That's where. So it goes under U.S. law, not French. Obviously, that goes without saying. But because Candace is in the U.S., she comes under this court. So it's filed in the Delaware Superior Court. Okay, so this legal standard in the U.S. is actual malice. Like that's what it is. And so that means that she knew the statements were false and acted with reckless disregard for the truth. So that's what they have to prove. Like good luck with that.
And here's where sorry, Ryan, finish.
Well, I was going to say, they are public figures, they're foreign officials, but they can sue in the U.S. because they're doing it as individuals. And so they're suing as individuals. But just look at the legal standard quick. Okay, so actual malice is for public figures, and the lower bar that's in the U.S. In France, it's a lower bar. The truth alone may not be enough. And so there's so free speech rights is a strong First Amendment protections in the U.S. It's weaker and more weight is given to reputation in France. There's a burden of proof on the plaintiff, has to prove and falsify actual malice, like actual intent to use that. And then in France, it's on the defendant to prove the truth. And so in this case, as far as I understand, and the damages must be proven or presumed if the malice is clear. And then in the French law, it's often presumed. So this, I mean, it's international, it's complicated. I think it's going to be pretty tough for them to win in this case.
It's going to be tough.
It is a PR thing for sure. But a lot of times they will do this. Companies will do this for different things. They bring a case just to kind of tie things up, or just to kind of save face a little bit, or something. I mean, nothing like this kind of thing is what I'm thinking of, but there's other reasons to do this sort of case.
Right. And here's where I think Candace Owens is kind of safe. She got sued in 2021 by Kimberly Klosik. She was a former Republican congressional candidate, and they filed a $20 million defamation lawsuit against Candace Owens in Tennessee. So
this ain't her first rodeo, that's for sure.
Right. $20 million defamation lawsuit. So
who was that?
It was a former Republican congressional candidate, Kimberly Klosik. It was her and her husband, I think, that
and it was a defamation thing as well, or
another defamation lawsuit, 2021. Yeah. So what she was, Owens was essentially claiming that Klosik was a madam of sorts, recruiting strippers for a strip club allegedly owned by her husband. And she alleged that these claims led to, the Klosiks alleged that the claims led to loss of political support, a canceled book deal, and removal from public events and harassment. So the outcome, December 2022, surprisingly enough, a Tennessee judge dismissed the lawsuit with prejudice under Tennessee's anti-SLAPP law, ruling in favor of Owens, and Klosik was actually ordered to pay Owens $115,000 to cover attorney fees, costs, and things like that. So very, very interesting that it was just dismissed, So I think, again, it's the same issue is they had to prove that that the defamation was true. They had to prove that Owens knew that the allegations were false, and that she was claiming that they're true anyways.
Right.
And they couldn't prove that. And it was, apparently,
which funny enough is exactly what's happening with the Steele dossier. That's exactly, they knew that it was false, and that's why they're being incriminated.
Right.
Yeah. Right now, the evidence that have come out that it was shown to the Obama administration that the Russia stuff was completely false, and then Obama said, "I don't care that it's false. We're running with it. Let's do it." So the evidence that
not to push it over to that side of the conversation, but I just thought it was an interesting connection. Like that is how the law works. So that's a good point, Troy.
Yeah, no, but to bring it back to the Candace Owens point, I think just based on this lawsuit in 2021 and based on what Ryan was saying about France, I think if this was going to trial in France, I think Candace Owens would have a lot less chance of winning.
Yeah.
But the fact that it's coming to trial here in Delaware in the United States, I think she's probably going to be just fine, But
And it would not be possible for them to bring the lawsuit in France. Like they can't extradite a U.S. citizen there. Like that wouldn't happen
unless she was in France saying this. Like if she was,
well, it would have had to broken a law.
Even as a U.S. citizen, if she's living in France, she can still get sued in France. But
then she would have to be extradited to go there so the U.S. would have to agree. U.S. government would have to agree that they need to send her there to extradite.
There's no reason for them to do that. Since she's not,
they don't have. I don't think they would have a compelling interest in that case.
But there's no reason for them to do that in this case. I wouldn't think.
So I just saw that. So I don't know if this is 100% accurate, but I saw defamation is just the civil claim. It's the higher term, and then you have libel, which is a subcategory, which is a written defamation, and then a slander, which is a spoken defamation, and then you have other things like actual malice, negligence, defamation per se, false light. Those are all different legal things. They all fall under defamation, I believe. And there's some of them are legal standards like So one's a category, one's a legal standard,
Can I just say one quick thing about why I have a hard time believing Candace Owens when she makes really extreme claims like this? To be fair, I know that there's evidence. I know that there's evidence I haven't looked into, right? And so I'm not making a claim saying like she's totally off base. She doesn't have any evidence about this. However, to me, she seems like somebody who in the past has made claims about things because they fit a certain narrative and a certain viewpoint that she has. And because they fit into that nicely, she's like, oh yeah, that's true, without having any sort of evidence or real reason to be stating the things that she's stating. It's just because it flows in. So I'll give you an example, and I'm going to avoid using the the party name here, just in case YouTube doesn't like it. But last year, she came under a lot of flack for basically making claims alleging that the German National Socialist Party, the World War II German political party, put it that way, that that during the concentration camps and stuff, she made a claim that they did not experiment on the individuals that were in the concentration camps. That there wasn't.
She denied medical experimentation on.
Yeah.
On
never mind Operation Paperclip, where we imported doctors and gave them new identities.
I don't know what she thinks about Operation Paperclip. But she was just like, oh, that's not true. That just sounds too crazy to me. That sounds like propaganda, right? That sounds like some propaganda that somebody came up. And I was like, okay, well, here's the thing. It's very well documented. She doesn't have any evidence that it somehow was just invented and it's somehow propaganda. And for me, it's just like, that's a crazy claim. And in my mind, the only reason she's making that claim, that's just like, oh, this is propaganda. This German party, they wouldn't do something like this. It doesn't make sense that they would do something like this when there's a lot of evidence that they did, in fact, do the things, right? Do those things. The only thing that makes sense to me is the fact that she has come out to be so anti-Israel that because it somehow fits in that there would be that these things are propaganda, that just fits into her stream, that fits into her narrative, that she's like, yeah, that must be true. And when I say that, I'm like, I don't mind somebody criticizing Israel for factual things. If you want to come out against, or even just like lobbying groups, you want to come out against AIPAC. I was reading stuff about AIPAC this morning, and I get it. Like, I understand why a lot of people are like, oh, Israel has too much influence or control over the United States because you have like the AIPAC lobbying group, and you have stuff that Mossad is doing. If you want to come out against AIPAC and say stuff they're doing, you want to come out against Mossad. If you want to criticize Israel's foreign policy, or if you think that they have too much effect over the United States, that's fine. You can criticize them all day for that, but point out to the things that are actually, have a good amount of evidence. Don't just say crazy, unfounded things like the Nazi experience. Oh, I just said the word. Their experimentation is like that. That's just propaganda.
So
like, you have no reason to say that other than that it fits nicely into your narrative, and that makes me, that kind of discredits a lot of what she says for me. Not saying that everything she says is wrong, and I appreciate some of the things.
Causes you to question.
There are some things that people say that makes you think, well, I got to go back and rethink other things that they said now, because I can't believe they said that. And for Candace, like, I want to give, like, I tip my hat to her for a lot of work that she's done like years ago, where she really shed the light on things. She was a good, I think, brought stuff to the culture conversation that needed to happen. And she had a good story about her transition. And like, she did like this the truth about the childhood vaccines. She did a thing about that and exposed a lot of that with data and scientific and all kinds of stuff, which is, and the real history behind those things. But lately, it just seems like, because if you tune into her stuff, she just seems kind of angry and very like in the details, like, not, I don't know if I would say gossipy, but it's kind of just like ranting, which I like rants, as you know, but it's almost like a rant that's more out of insecurity or a personal something versus just like a passion for the truth or whatever it is, like it seems like there's been a big shift in her whole demeanor and how she approaches everything. So and that just might be from my snippets of watching her, but it doesn't have the same kind of flavor or whatever you want to call it, the same attraction to her content as it did, 2-3 years ago.
Right. Yeah. Doug, do you have something else that you're wanting to bring, like a twist or something at the end? Because if not, I have kind of like a wrap up point that I want to make and kind of pose a question to everybody based on what Reese is saying and what Ryan is saying.
So no, I want to say something about that real quick, if that's cool. I don't really have a big twist because I was kind of saving this dossier thing a little bit for the end, but we got into it sooner, so I brought it up sooner, and so that was kind of like the ending that I had planned. So we can definitely go.
Well, I have kind of a twist to the story. So yeah, go ahead and chime in, and then I'll give that.
Yeah, I was just going to say in defense of Candace for a bit, I think that what's happening with her is that a lot of her stuff is getting cherry picked right now because she puts out so much information that it would be really, really easy to jump to the conclusion. Like, I mean, literally take her conclusions out of what she's been saying and say, look at this crazy thing that she's saying, but she actually has a long line of logic following up to it that people are ignoring. And that's what I have kind of discovered in this story specifically. Now, I can't speak to like the Nazi story, all of that. That seems like a whole different thing. I don't know anything about that one. I haven't seen her actual statement on it. But for this one in particular, it seems like a crazy statement. And if there's any sort of indication of a typical procedure here, if this is a format of that, what it looks like to me is she's making the supposedly crazy statements, but she actually has a lot of stuff that follows up to it. And like I said, I'm not going to say one way or the other what I believe on this story, but I do lean one way, and you can probably figure out what way that is. And it's because of just a little bit of research. I just did a little bit. I haven't spent the same amount of time that she has on it, and it looks pretty convincing to me personally.
You're talking about the Macron. You're talking about the Macron story,
specifically the Macron, the Brigitte Macron story, and the whole idea behind journalism is to dig down deep into a story to find the truth of the matter. And unfortunately, the truth is most of the time buried with lies. And you have to get to the point where you're literally causing government entities to sue you in order to get down to the bottom of the truth on it. And oftentimes the truth really doesn't ever come out because you're told what to think. And I just can't help but see the mainstream media and the leftist liberal media go crazy on this. And here's a funny thought that I had on it too, is why are all the leftists so upset about this? Shouldn't they be embracing the idea that Brigitte might be a man? That's kind of what I like.
I know, it kind of fits with their ideology. That is a good question.
That's a tell. That might be a little bit of a tell. Yeah.
And that's it's so to me, it's red flags, and red flags are not proof of anything. But when most of the time I've got the long vision and I do things years in advance. I see the red flags, I notate them, and then years later, those red flags somehow get a little bit more solid. And I'm like, so we'll see.
A Western example would be the leftist elites supporting a border in Ukraine, but not the U.S. That's an example of, oh, well, there's a there now. Let me look. Right.
Why?
Makes no
There's
sense.
A reason.
So,
there's an agenda in here somewhere.
Exactly.
I think what's going to get blown open is that whatever this agenda is, let's see. Let's find out what it is.
Sure. My initial thought with the whole, because I had that thought too. I was just like, oh, well, the whole transgender thing is obviously more popular, and even in left-leaning circles more recently, in the last decade or so, become a lot more normalized, right? Well, but actually, I mean, in a way, that actually kind of, to be honest, it kind of hurts the argument that this individual was born a man, because if they were nowadays, it's like becomes totally normalized. Like if that was their relationship and that was 100% going true, then they could come out and they would be celebrated for it. Like on the left circles, they'd be like, if they came out and they're like, hey, I'm transgender, then everybody would be like, oh, wow, this is awesome. This is great. And so the fact that they wouldn't be rejected for that, I think is actually a little bit of evidence that, in my mind, is like, well, why, if that's true at this point, why on earth would an individual be covering that up and hiding that and saying, no, I was born a female. This is all libel. This is all, I'm going to sue somebody that's saying this, because if it was actually, and like, I know you might say like, well, it's hiding something else up. It's like, okay, well, obviously if that really did happen when they were kids and there, somebody died and all that stuff, then there must be some real, probably perverse, weird, hidden stuff from that family, maybe that they don't want uncovered or something like that. But I don't think it's not so easy to say like, well, how come the left isn't embracing the fact that this person's transgender? It's like, well, the reason is because they're saying I'm not, and the left is on their side because they're their political party, and they're like, yeah, this person's lying about them, so that's not a convincing argument for me. I'll just say.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. So I want to try to wrap this up, because Reese brought up a point where Candace Owens made these comments about denying German socialist political party in World War II, the fact that they're denying the evidence that they did medical experimentation on Jews, right? And there's not only is there all the evidence of it, but there's all the testimonies that came out of it. The evidence includes hundreds and hundreds of stories and articles and a bunch of dozens of books that came out of the eyewitnesses, the people that were there. So I think it's like in that sense, it's kind of overwhelming that side of it. So the fact that she would deny those things does
the Nuremberg trials, like people were tried for these crimes.
Yeah, that people were tried for the crimes, and they brought evidence proving, and convicting these people. So there's all of that, and it's like there's so much overwhelming evidence of that. It's like to try to even deny that, it does seem very crazy to me. It does seem, and it seems very much like she's just trying to follow a narrative, or that she's fallen off a cliff, in what she believes. And the result of that was that in 2024, the result of those claims, she was denied a visa from New Zealand and Australia. Mm-hmm. So Candace Owens can no longer travel to New Zealand or Australia because of those claims. And here's my twist to the story, or here's my potential conclusion. I think that Candace, I'm gonna guess what's gonna happen with this trial, with her getting sued by Macron. I think it's going to either be dismissed, or she's going to, kind of win, I guess, or whatever. I think it's going to be dismissed that it's defamation. Mm-hmm. I don't think the truth about what's her face is going to necessarily be made public unless they do the whole DNA thing. But I do think that France is going to say, I think France is going to deny a visa to Candace Owens. I don't think she's going to be able to travel to France anymore either. And so this to me is like, okay, is that a harsh punishment? Maybe not.
Well, I would say that there's no visas required for travel to Europe.
She's going to get banned or whatever.
I know what you mean. They'll reject her passport.
She's going to get banned. She's not going to be allowed into France anymore. And it's like eventually that to me is like setting a pattern, a precedent. It's like a pattern of, all right, are you really telling the stories that need to be told? And are you really saying things that are helping the world positively if you just keep getting banned from countries? It's like, that's the question. So I'm going to pull up the curse that I think that Candace Owens potentially is facing now. So this is obviously me coming at it from a Christian perspective. We are hosts. Not everyone listening to this podcast is Christian, and that's fine, but we're going to come at it from our perspective. All four hosts here are Christians. So this is Genesis 12:3. It says, I will bless those who bless you, but I will curse those who curse you. And through you, I will bless all the nations. So this is God in Genesis talking about Israel. I think, and I'm not going to say 100% because I'm not saying that Candace Owens is an anti-Semite. I'm not saying that, but I'm saying she has definitely tended to lean towards, not just productive criticism of Israel, which I'm all for that, but towards potential things that are not true, and then going very deep in that direction. So I'm wondering, could there be not necessarily a Trump curse happening here, but like an actual curse, like Candace getting what she deserves, or maybe like some sort of like, does that make sense?
Cause and effect action. Yeah.
Yeah. Has God gotten involved in this story? That's my question for y'all. And then we're going to end with that.
I think it is possible, but I think there's other, it wouldn't be just that curse or that specific promise from God in the Bible. I think there's other things as well that perhaps she's outside of for how she's handled herself with some of these things. Like I said, there's a way, people should hate Christians for, you don't want to be hated, but they should be against and offended from the message that you're giving about Christ. And that's offensive. It shouldn't be how you're saying it, or how you're saying whatever it is that you're saying, if that's offensive. Like that's a whole different issue that we need to deal with as Christ followers. So I don't know if it's that specific issue, but I do think that she maybe say there's things that's true, and then she just walks it out too far, or she kind of puts it in the stronger light than it should be. And then that is a false criticism. It's a bad criticism of something. And so, yeah, I think she can, that's what I don't understand about this one is it's like, why push so hard on this issue instead of just you make the statement, but for her, I guess it's a much bigger deal. So there has to be something else that it's connected to. Otherwise, it makes no sense to be pushing so hard on this for so long. And so,
I agree.
Yeah,
I don't think she's stupid. I'll say that much. So there's got to be a reason.
Yeah, I don't think she's stupid really. In this case, for the Macron thing, I go back to thinking just like, I don't know what she thinks there is that's more, but I imagine she must think that there's more, because it's kind of like the Epstein stuff. If I could just throw that there for a second. I think it's very clear that there is more to the Epstein stuff. I don't really know anybody that genuinely believes like, nah, there's really nothing else there. And so I appreciate her continuing to push on that, and even push back against Trump and saying like, hey, you promised we were going to see some stuff, and we're not seeing it. Well, where's the stuff? Where's you're right. And so I think that's all well and good. And there's evidence that there are things behind that, right? With this, the Macron thing, I know I'm gonna get to the criticizing Israel thing, but to the Macron thing, I'm like, what else is behind this? Even if she proves this, and it's just like, okay, it's a transgender person, it's like, okay, and like, what's behind it? If there's actually something behind it, that would be interesting to know. But me, at this moment, I'm like, I don't know what else is behind it. For you talking about, is she actually being like, cursed or whatever? I don't know. I think of it. I do think that as a Christian, I think that Candace is a legitimate Christian. I think she's a believer in Christ. I think she's very clear about her, beliefs in Christ and all that kinds of things. I do kind of understand some of her logic and why she has gone so into the she's picked up on some things about Israel and about AIPAC and the lobbyists and maybe some of the intelligence community stuff. She's picked up on some of those things, and she's gone so far into it. I think that I don't know if there's some sort of like biblical curse being invoked or something like that, but I wouldn't be surprised. It's kind of like, I'm speaking from spiritual perspective here. If you're a Christian, we believe that, like, obviously, ultimately, your sins are covered and forgiven. But also, if you're a Christian and you're picking up bricks and throwing them in the air, if they come back down and hit you in the head, it's kind of like, okay, you did that to yourself, right?
Yeah.
There's an element of that. So how much does that go into just like cause and effect? How much does that go into, some sort of actual biblical curse? I really don't know.
Just
that's really
natural consequences.
For me, I think the brick this is me speaking as somebody who's not even really super familiar with Candace. So if I'm speaking like out of turn here, let me know. But for me, I think the brick that she's throwing up in the air that's starting to hit her in the head is she's gone into the whole, like, she sees the connections of like the elite world and all this bad stuff that's going on. But I think she's bent too much into, she needs to figure out who's orchestrating it, because you can see all the connections. And personally, I think there's lots of connections, but I think most of the connections are just from people running in the same circles who are selfish and have selfish interests, right? And are doing evil things. And they want to, you have to pay your dues and stuff like that to move up access. But she's going from it of like, okay, who is orchestrating this? There must be someone who's orchestrating all of this. And she has decided that would be, the Zionists or the Jewish people or whatever, essentially. And that is like her key for explaining absolutely everything.
So she kind of has a construct in her mind, and then everything else gets explained from that. Like,
right, exactly. Yeah. And I just don't think, even though if you can make those connections, I think there's a difference between connections and orchestrating. And I think that she's kind of throwing some bricks in the air and getting hit in the head by saying this group of people is orchestrating everything. And so it all comes back to this group of people. And it's just like, well, that's a bias that ends up hitting, is going to end up coming back and hitting you in the head, because you can't see clearly, because you're not following evidence anymore. And you're not allowing there to be just like, disconnected evil people doing evil things. You have to tie all of it back to this certain person and this certain kind of person. And that's what she's done. And I think she's going to keep hitting herself in the head with those bricks if she keeps doing that.
Yeah, I think what you're saying, it's kind of the idea of correlation is not necessarily causation. Correlation and causation is not the same thing. Just because things are similar or related doesn't mean one caused the other or influenced the other at all.
Right. But I think there's also an idea of, she probably has found evidence of some, elite Jews that were involved in certain things, so it's like, I think there's that side of it too, where it's like some evidence, of something evil happening does not mean that those people were tied to everything that's happened. And it also doesn't mean that, it can all be tied together, at the end of the day. So I don't know. I think that's a good point, Reese. I think that's a really good point. Closing remarks. We're almost at the hour 10 mark. So what are y'all's closing thoughts?
My final thoughts are, it's interesting to see what happens with this. I'm not particularly, this to me feels kind of like a pop culture magazine type topic. But if we did see something that was more, it would be a big thing. It would call into question the legitimacy of the presidency and all kinds of things there. So, it would be a big deal, but it'd be interesting to see what the thing behind the scenes is for me to actually be interested in continuing to follow the story. But otherwise, it is fascinating to talk about this though, because it does involve Candace and who is a major platform in the U.S. And so I do think it's worthy of this show and us talking through this so we can know how to think about these kinds of things. But it'll be interesting to see what comes of this. So thanks for putting all this information together.
Yeah, thank you, Doug, for real.
Yeah, for sure. I think that You know, it's going to be interesting to watch the turnout of this, but I don't know. I kind of have a feeling that she's either going to win this case or it's going to be dropped in a way that she'll claim it as a win and she'll walk away unscathed either way.
Yeah.
I don't think she's going to get taken down by it that much. I know. So I
don't think she's going back to Paris for any romantic getaways with her husband, though. I'm pretty sure
she might, though. She's the kind of person like she might just try to figure out a way to do that, just to rub it in their face, you know.
Well, I mean, she might get banned legally, you know. So we'll see.
That doesn't stop everyone.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah,
that's true. That's true.
Just show up on a boat and you're fine,
right?
Yeah.
Just show up on a little like dinghy and you're let into the country and given a hotel.
Oh my gosh,
that's funny.
We're gonna stop before we say something bad.
Right.
Way too late for that. All right.
Yeah.
Y'all are awesome. Thank y'all for being in the comments and having a good conversation and hanging in there with us. We'll have to wait and see what happens, but we will see y'all tomorrow.
See you.
Yep. God bless.